Hi everyone, I'm David McLaughlin, and over the past year I've helped more than 30,000 students get their PMP certification, and I've also taken more than 1,000 practice questions myself, some directly from PMI, and in putting those two things together I've found a few key things that really work when you're answering questions on your PMP exam. It's sort of a cheat sheet, if you will. In fact, I've called it the PMP Fast Track because these few little tips and tricks that I'm about to share with you now will actually really help you to pass your PMP exam. Whether you're good at taking tests or whether you've studied all of these things already, it will really help you, and it will just help you understand what you need to do and what you need to know for your exam as well. These little few tips and tricks, it's going to be fantastic. Also, I've already got this on my course, which is my Udemy course. The link in the description is below. I'm going to make this available as a download for the videos and a download for this presentation, so those in the course can get that. And for this particular presentation on YouTube, I'm not sure how long I'm going to keep it up. I did want to give a version out there for free just because I used a lot of free resources when I was getting my PMP, and it helped turn my life around. It truly changed my career. So I just want to give back a little bit. Let's get into it. Anyway, that's enough of me waffling on. There's 3 key sections to the PMP Fast Track, and that is people. So the people, conflict and leadership that we're going to need to know when we're answering PMP questions. The process, so Agile process and the predictive process. What do we do when? What are the steps that we need to go through when we're in a certain phase of our project so that we can answer the question correctly? And then there's a little thing here because you'll notice that these actually match up with the PMI's talent triangle. So power skills, which is people skills, way of working, which is our process. But business acumen, that one is just so simple. It really is just deliver value. And we'll go through that in a second. So we didn't need a whole section on that. What I've done is replaced that with some general exam tips. Now, I've given these general exam tips before. If you've seen them already, then just skip past that section. But if you haven't, these will truly take your PMP exam to the next level. Just these exam tips by themselves will help you pass the PMP exam. So it'll really up your game. So I think that's the next one up. So let's get straight into the general exam tips. And then we can get into the really good stuff of the PMP Fast Track after that. All right, general tips. Again, I won't go through these in a lot of detail because we've been through them already. When you take the PMP exam, you're probably going to see the majority of questions scenario-based. Something's going wrong. We need to solve that problem scenario with our project management and our people skills, which is why those things are so important, and our project management processes. Usually you'll have 2 or 3 answers that seem correct, and we have to choose the most correct answer. So it's really quite tricky. So here are the first 5 tips in the general exam fast track. When you go through the question, highlight all the keywords. Yes, it is a digital exam, but you have some tools. It's like a little PowerPoint presentation, similar to what you're looking at now. You can actually highlight the keywords. So is it about risk? Is it about scope? Is it about the project sponsor? Or is it about conflict? What is it exactly about? All the information you need is going to be included in the question, so don't worry about missing something. Now, we wanted to determine if the project is predictive, agile, or hybrid, and we need to do that because we're going to respond to the question differently depending on each one. So is it predictive? Is it agile? We need to figure that out by highlighting the keywords. Then we just need to decide on the topic or principle that the question is asking us to solve. And that, again, is it about risk? Is it about scope? Is it about project sponsor? Is it about negotiation? It should be pretty clear. Highlight the keywords and decide which topic the question is asking us to solve. Then just get rid of any answers that don't directly relate to that project methodology. So if the question is about risk, then get rid of all of the other ones that don't relate to risk, and at the end, select one of the remaining answers. Now, this is the elimination method. You've seen me use this in the 200 Agile questions and the 150 PMP 7 questions and a whole bunch of other questions and answer videos. That's the method that I use, and it works really well. So I won't go into that. You can view those question and answer videos separately and just see it in practice. but it's pretty good. So it will really, really help you. Make sure you answer every question, because if you don't answer it, you can't get the points. And know your timing. It will count down from 230 minutes. You have 1 minute and 15 seconds for each question, because you've got 180 questions. So at 60 questions, when you've got your first break, you should have 155 minutes remaining. And at 120 questions, you should have 80 minutes remaining. So make sure you keep an eye on that clock and don't freak out. Just try and keep within that 1 minute and 15 seconds. That's actually part of the real challenge. That's what makes it quite hard. Okay, so that was nice and easy, right? If you've seen it before, I apologize. But if you haven't, that's really going to help you. Now we're going to get into some of the really, really good stuff. And this stuff is really powerful. The people and then the process for project management. Let's start with the people. And this is all about things like conflict, negotiation, working with people, stakeholders, and all that sort of thing. And the first 3 tips are really just high-level things that that you can default to anytime that you're unsure. And the first one is, it's so simple, but it makes sense. As a project manager, remember, our ultimate goal is to deliver the project. Surprise, surprise. And also to make sure that the project delivers value. So if you have a question where it says delay the project, don't do it. If you're adding extra resources, try not to do it. If we're doing anything that doesn't deliver value or that hinders us from deliver value, try to avoid it. That's our ultimate goal, is to deliver value amongst everything else. And these other things are really, really good as well. With the questions, you'll find something going wrong. People are unhappy. Be direct, go direct to the source of the problem always, but also be collaborative. So don't be sneaky, don't be underhanded, go directly to the problem and be collaborative in your response. Just that one alone is probably going to be 40 to 50% of the questions that you can fall back on. And then the third one here is be honest. So again, don't do sneaky or underhanded things in your answers. You will have the option to do that. Be honest, take responsibility, and don't pass the buck to other people. Remember, it's our responsibility to deliver value above everything else. First 3 ones, pretty simple, but now we're going to get into a little bit more detail. And the detail starts with problem solving. You're going to notice in your exam questions that you're going to have a lot of options. You might add resources, you might delay the project, you might do this, that, or the other. But what we really want to be doing is problem solving, or you might be getting rid of a key stakeholder. Problem solve. Always, always, always default to problem solve. Problem solve, problem solve, problem solve. Find the root cause of the issue before using any money. Make sure we're solving the right problem. So go directly to where the problem is happening. Is it the team? Is it the supplier? Look for the keywords in the question. If they use terms that you are unfamiliar with in the question, then revert back to the question keywords and make sure that you're solving the root cause of the problem. So what is the problem solving process? And this is going to be handy because you might be at a different phase depending on where your question is. Define the problem first. Identify the root cause next. That's going to be a big one. Brainstorm solutions with your team. Choose the best one, implement it, and then verify that it worked. That is your very simple plan, do, check, act, your Deming cycle. You probably know from your project management education. We're planning, doing, checking, and adjusting to see if it worked or if it didn't work. So always default to problem solving if you can. And then always go direct to the person, to the team, or where the issue is. Now, I mentioned this before, but this is using expert judgment. And you remember this from the PMBOK guide. Use the right expertise. So go to the team for their way of working. Go to the team for the estimates on their way of work, or on the work that they're performing, The customer, go to the customer for their requirements, and go to the customer for product feedback. So always go direct to the right person, to wherever the issue is in the question. That one is also going to be extremely useful. Now here is another one, problem solve before you escalate. So ideally, look, what will happen is you'll have a few questions where you may need to escalate, but before you do, we're probably going to want to problem solve first. So, but before escalating to the project sponsor, try and solve it first. Be direct and collaborative if you've got answers with those options. Don't suspend the project if you can help it. Again, sometimes you may need to, but don't make that your first answer. Try not to suspend the project if you can help it, because we want to be delivering value. Do not add resources or delay items, again, if you can help it, because we want to problem solve first. So again, default to trying to solve the problem as a project manager, and that's really where we want to be. Now, conflict, people and conflict, it happens in the real world. It happens on the PMP exam. So this is what we want to know. Again, there's different types of conflict resolution types. You should know these from your PMP education. Check out my Udemy course if you don't know it, or if they didn't teach you these things, because it's definitely in my course. Problem solving is the one that we want to go for. Surprise, surprise. That's a win-win approach. Now, compromising is often the second choice here, because both of us are giving up a little bit. It's known as a lose-lose approach, but both parties are giving up a little bit. So that's why, it's still sort of even, I guess. Now, the ones that we don't really want to go for, accommodating, only accommodate if there's an extreme power imbalance. Like if the project sponsor is forcing us to do something, then it's probably there's a power imbalance there. We can accommodate them. So it's a bit of a lose for us, a bit of a win for them. But again, they're in charge, they're funding it, so that's up to them. Probably these ones, forcing it and avoiding it, those are the ones we don't really want to do. Again, these are in order, so ideally problem solving is first. Senior executives can influence other senior executives. So if there is an issue with other senior executives and we don't have the power to deal with it, again, go to where the power level is correct. And part of that is understanding accountabilities and responsibilities. So making sure that we know who does what, because that's going to influence how we answer the questions. The project manager ensures that the work gets done. They also ensure that the team members are adequately trained. So the team can help here, but the project manager needs to know and needs to make sure that the team is trained correctly. The project sponsor provides that funding and initiates the project with the project charter, and they sign off and accept the deliverables right at the end. Now, customer can provide feedback on the product, but ultimately the project sponsor or whoever's funding it will sign off and accept the deliverables. The team provides estimates on their work, they perform the work. Vendors are responsible for their deliverable. If you've got procurements, and that's outlined in the contract. If you've got any issues, always go back to the contract. I think I've got more details on this later, so in the process probably, which is great. So great segue into the last two phases of the PMP Fast Track, the Agile and Predictive processes. You will need to know, again, these step-by-step processes just to know where we're up to, so we know what to do at each phase. And let's start with the Agile Fast Track, or the Agile process. When you're highlighting those keywords, how do we know if it's an Agile project? We look for these keywords, and you'll recognize a lot of these: iterations and sprints, the product owner, Scrum Master, retrospectives, demonstrations or reviews, product or sprint backlogs, daily stand-ups, minimum viable products, epics, spikes, Kanban boards. And remember, when you're answering questions, the two different backlogs, the sprint backlog has our user stories, and that's more detailed. The product backlog is and the product roadmap are a high level. They're more of our deliverables. Those are at the epic level, so the high level, if you're answering questions around those. And again, creating with your team their way of work. You'll have a lot of things that does relate to people as well. The definition of ready and the definition of done. So the criteria for when work can begin, or the criteria for when a user story or a feature is complete. We create this with the team. It's a collaborative thing that we want to do. In Agile, if we have the choice, we always want to go for making the work visible. Do we send a document? No. Do we send a report? No. We want to put all of our project information on the walls, making it visible, or in a team area, in our information radiator. So always go for making things visible. Use our Kanban board to view the work building up in each area. For example, testing, development, analysis. Is there lots of work building up here? Then we need to problem solve. You guessed it. We're going to hear that a lot. And also to limit the work in progress. So we're not context switching. We're not handing off. We're not doing too many tasks. We can focus and just really hone in and get it done. And also, again, no reports. We're doing real things. Demonstrate the real things with the customer. So not reports or documents. If you have those choices, always go for real things and demonstrating close in person, place and time with your customer and with your team. So Agile, work directly with the customer again on product requirements. Again, we don't want big documents. We actually go and talk to the customer and we say, what are your requirements? Imagine that. Co-located, face-to-face communication, always go for those things. Again, no documents. Protect the team as a servant leader from blockers, from impediments, and from diversions. You'll definitely have a few questions there. It's our job to protect the team. We want to remove blockers. We want to escalate if it's beyond their level, but we can take it to the next level for them. And we want to always coach. Go for that keyword. Coach that team for growth. If they don't have the capability, that's, again, our responsibility. Just do it if you can. If you have that option, just get it done. The minimum viable product is usually where we start. It's a small piece. We test it with the market. We release it to the market quickly so that we can see if it's actually working. You'll probably have quite a few questions on MVPs and minimum viable products. Just release something small to get that feedback. Now, the last two in Agile, know your ceremonies and know your people and your roles. So you could probably tell these to me, I hope, if you've done your project management education. Again, check out my Udemy course. It has all of this stuff. It's all in there. The backlog refinement is where we get together with our customer, developer, and tester to break down epics into smaller user stories, add the acceptance criteria. Now, the key here, always go for smaller if you can. So it has to fit in an iteration. Smaller releases we're going to go for so that we can release value sooner. Always go for smaller if you can help it. Iteration planning, we're planning the next iteration's work with a team. Again, the team get together to do this. The daily stand-up, where we meet together to discuss what we've done, what we're going to do, and if anything is blocking us, so any impediments, and we can remove those impediments as a servant leader. Iteration review, where we're demonstrating an actual piece that we've created with our customer or with the product owner. And a retrospective, where we're improving our process. So we say what worked well, what didn't work well, what did we learn, and what still puzzles us. And that just helps us improve our way of working with the team. And we do that at the end of our iteration, so that we can continuously improve. Now, the roles are important as well. Know your product owner. They prioritize the product backlog. And if anyone adds scope, they can, but the product owner still has to approve it. So if you get questions there, the product owner approves those changes in scope, and they prioritize highest value to lowest value, highest value first. Scrum Master is the servant leader. They remove blockers, grow the team, coach the team, facilitates and problem solves with the team, remembering that, making sure that we've got psychological safety so our team can speak up. The team themselves, in the team we want T-shaped generalizing specialists. You should know what this is again, one deep specialty and many different areas of interest. So they can do a bit of design, a bit of business knowledge, but they're developers at heart. So that's our T-shaped generalizing specialists, and we can coach them or help grow those people into T-shaped people if we need to. The team delivers value as outlined in the definition of done. Oh, and the last one here, the team uses wideband Delphi. So remember, everyone who's working on the item estimates the effort, and the high and low discuss, and they say, hey, this is why I think it's low, this is why I think it's high, and the team comes to a consensus. That's also planning poker in Agile. So if you're estimating in Agile, it's probably going to be that method. Amazing work. Now that's our process for Agile. Process for Predictive. Let's get into that one next. And that's the last part. That's our step-by-step sequential projects. And fairly simple. The business case we start with, How are we delivering value? What value are we delivering? That feeds into the project charter. The project charter initiates our project. And if you ever get questions, check that project charter for the high-level goals and the high-level deliverables of our project. So to know why we started it in the first place. If we're working with a team, we use a team charter for our team ways of working, roles and agreements, and we are always improving this and iterating on this. In Predictive, we're going to need to know some basic mathematics, and this is for our earned value management. Planned value is what we said we would have completed at this point in time. Earned value is what we have actually completed at this point in time. Actual cost is what we have actually spent at this point in time. So knowing these things, they may not even use those terms, just so that you know. It might just be your project has spent $500,000, it's delivered $200,000 worth of value and this sort of thing. And we need to know if we're behind or if we're ahead or if we've spent more than we should. So we need to be able to figure that out. It really does come back to basic mathematics. You should be able to figure it out. Here are a few tips for these two things. If you get SPI, Schedule Performance Index, Cost Performance Index, Schedule Variance or Cost Variance, always remember Cost Performance Index or Schedule Performance Index, 1 is the key. So 1 is where we should be. If it's over 1, so 1.25, we've delivered more value than we said we would. So we're ahead of schedule or we're under our cost. But if it's less than 1, so 0.85, for example, then we've delivered less than what we said we would have. So we're over our budget or we're behind on our schedule. I hope that makes sense. And it's a little bit tricky, but that way it's like super easy to remember. Just remember anything around the number 1, more, we've delivered more, less, we've delivered less. Same with schedule variance and cost variance, except it's positive or negative. So positive, we've delivered more than we said we would, and so we're ahead of our schedule or under our cost. Negative, so less than 0, we've delivered less than what we said we would, so we're behind on our schedule or over our cost. So pretty cool and pretty easy, and that's a nice little trick. I like that one. Now you know, just in case you get any of those questions. Always know your processes and always know your plans and documents. Remember, we gather our stakeholders, gather the scope, put it on a schedule, break it down, put it on a schedule, put it to a cost and a budget, make sure that we've got our quality plans in place, gather our resources, ensure we know how we're communicating, plan our risk and plan our procurement. And if you get any questions on what to do in any of these areas, go back to your plan. So your schedule management plan for your schedule, your cost management plan for the budget. How do we manage scope? Go back to your scope management plan. Each of these plans has the roles and the process for how that area is handled. So always remember that. And let's go into these in a little bit more detail. Stakeholder engagement plan. We use this one when we need to find people, when we need to add people, and who and how do we engage people on our project. We'll definitely get questions around this. Identify those stakeholders and classify them. You could classify them many different ways. Influence and impact is one of my favorites. You might have the salience model, which is a 3D or a cube method, which is power, urgency, and legitimacy, I think, the 3 different things. And then we put all of that information in the stakeholder register, all of our stakeholders, and we use our communications management plan for how and what we need to communicate with those stakeholders if we ever get questions. Now, deep dive into scope, the requirements come from the customer, or we could get best practices by benchmarking against another company, but generally we're going to be working with our customer directly. We turn these into our scope statement, the work breakdown structure, and work packages. So we're breaking it down into smaller and smaller pieces into a work package we can assign to a team member. The customer can verify the scope through their quality control, but the project sponsor or whoever's paying for the project is the one who signs off on that scope once complete. And we did say that a little bit before, but just reiterating that. So that's part of the scope process. For schedule management, we break down those work packages into activities on a schedule, and then we place them on a schedule. Now we need to know a few things with schedule management, and we've got precedence diagramming, and I've got tricks for all of these. So remember, with precedence diagramming, think of it like two activities, and it's in the same order as the two words. So finish to finish, the second activity cannot finish until the first activity has finished. Finish to start, the second activity cannot start until the first activity has finished. So it's just in the same order. And this one here, start to finish, the second activity cannot finish until the first activity has started. So if you get questions around that, that's the trick for precedence diagramming and how to order things on your project. Float or slack is available room to move an item without affecting other items or affecting the project. So that is what we need to know there. The critical path is the shortest project duration of tasks that have to be done in sequence. So if we can't move these and we can't do them in parallel, they have to be done in sequence, then that is going to be the shortest time we can complete the project in. That's the critical path. And anything that moves on that critical path, then it's critical, so it moves everything, which is a pain. Using leads, we're leading it forward, and using lags, it is lagging behind, so we can move it backwards. Fast tracking is always preferred. That's performing activities in parallel. But we can use crashing, which is adding resources and cost, if we're under budget. So if we're under budget, we can use schedule crashing, which is adding those resources and cost. But that does increase the risk. So always be aware of that. You might have a few answers around risk and crashing. You're probably going to get a few questions on estimating with the team. Know your 3-point estimation or your beta or PERT estimation. These two are so similar, but you probably have a question on one or both of these. It's the optimistic estimate and the most likely estimate, and then the pessimistic estimate. So we add those together and then divided by 3. It's just an average. So it's so simple. It's just an average. So if we've got 4, 5, and 6, and that's 15 divided by 3, then our average is 5. That's going to be our estimate. Now the same thing for beta, except it's 4 times the most likely, and then to get an average, we need to divide it by 6 instead, because there's now 6 numbers. I hope that makes sense. Again, very straightforward. Those two, you'll probably get at least one question. Bottom-up estimation, that is adding all of the lower-level items together and estimating on those, and then aggregating them up into the higher levels of the project to get an overall estimate. That is more precise. So we're getting right into the detail. It's more precise. But if we want a faster... it takes longer though, too. So if we want a faster method, use analogous estimation. That's faster and less precise. We just use information from a similar project or a similar deliverable to estimate on whatever we're looking at. And we might use parametric estimation. Probably won't get anything around this, but it's using a parameter like $10 a meter or $100 an hour, or those sorts of things. Now, one of the best parts about Predictive, this is the change control process. Very, very important. Remember, in Predictive, we can't make a change to any baselined plan or any baselined deliverable without going through the formal change control process. And generally, that change control process looks like this. So any stakeholder can request or raise a change. We will need to note that in the change log. So we note that down. Then we analyze the impact of that change to our cost and schedule, because we need to know if it's going to be good or bad, or if it's going to impact us. We take that change to the approvers. That's usually the change control board, but it's outlined in the change management plan. Remember that one. They will give us an outcome, approved, rejected, or deferred, and we communicate that outcome to the stakeholders, and then we note that outcome in the change log, and we proceed. We either go ahead with it, or we just proceed as we were. That's our change management process. Risk management is also a big deal. So remember, an issue has happened already. So if it's already happened, we note it in the issue log. If it hasn't happened and it could happen in the future, it's a risk, and we note it in the risk register. So we brainstorm those risks with the team, log and update it in the risk register. Then I classify it by its likelihood and impact from 1 to 5. And you might get some questions around this on which risks to do first. So always go with the highest risks early. So if it's a likelihood of 3 and an impact of 4, we multiply those together, that gives us 12. So if there's one that's 5 and a 5, that's 5 times 5 is 25. That's going to be higher, so we want to do that first. So that's how you figure those out. Remember to multiply those two things together, and that's how you determine which one is the highest. If a risk was previously identified on your project, always remember to use the risk response that you came up with. So if you've got that risk response there already, try and use it. Try and use that one first. And know your risk responses. For risks, we could accept the risk. That's just not doing anything. We note the risk down and we just don't do anything about it. We also might want to mitigate our risk. We take action to address that risk specifically, so we put it in controls. We could transfer the risk using insurance to transfer the risk or transfer it to another party. Escalate the risk if it's out of our control, if we don't have authority to address it, or if it's out of the control of the project. And we can avoid the risk by just removing the piece of scope that causes that risk in the first place. So always know your risk responses. Lastly, we're going to be working with vendors and procurements on our projects in the PMP exam. The statement of work is what needs to be done by the vendor or the seller. So always remember that. Always check the contract if there is a dispute. So if something's gone wrong and people can't agree, always go back to the contract to figure out what needs to be done and how to address it. And we can help problem solve with the vendor, but the vendor is ultimately responsible for their work. So don't take on their work. Make sure that we can problem solve with them, but they still have to do it, not us. And don't delay the project. Just use different contract types to manage the uncertainty. So if we've got clear and stable scope, we can use a fixed price contract. If scope is expected to change, we can use a cost reimbursable contract, so cost plus an incentive fee, for example. Or if it's just ongoing with no end in sight, we might just want to use a time and materials contract. So that's just an ongoing contract. As we're closing the project, just to know the general closing steps. We always want to make sure that we're handing it off and making sure that it has delivered the value that they wanted. So finalize any open claims, make sure there's no claims on the project with our procurements or our vendors. Confirm formal acceptance with the business, so make sure they've accepted the deliverable and ensure that transition to operations. Then we can formally release our resources and close any accounts so people can't take money from the project accounts anymore. And then finalize the lessons learned, archive that project information, and measure the product benefits. And that could be done sort of anywhere around here. We can use Agile and Predictive together in a hybrid approach. So again, instead of adding resources or delaying the project, we might have a predictive project, and we might need to do some Agile, have an Agile track at the same time. So understand that we can use hybrid, both Agile and Predictive at the same time, and that might solve some of our problems. And there it is. That's a lot. So that's quite a lot. But also, really, for such a huge amount of information, that was quite a small amount of time. So I hope that's helped. I mean, watch it again if you need to. Check it out. Know that I go through it in a bit more detail in my Udemy course. Plus, you can download the videos. Plus, you can download the actual presentation, so you can review that in your own time and look at that. So that's a little bit more handy. Also, again, giving this away for free because free resources helped me. If this does help you, then consider getting the course to do your PDUs to renew your certificate later on down the track, or just consider my courses in general. They're not bad. They're a little bit of fun, and we have those real projects that we go through. And so, yeah, it's a good bit of fun to go through. I think you'll enjoy it. But I hope you've enjoyed this. I've certainly enjoyed myself. It's the fastest way to get up to speed. It's the PMP Fast Track, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.